Hello, everybody. It's a big pleasure again to be with you guys again, and we're gonna have a great guest today, Pavel Kolnik from Hendrix Genetics. We really appreciate all the support and all these series of webinars that we're doing in collaboration with Hendrix Genetics, and we appreciate the support and holding this vision of providing education in a accessible and a practical way. So Pavel is going to be talking about today the main principles of a good reading program for pullets. This presentation is going to be around 40 minutes. And then if you have any questions, there is a little box in your screen, a question and answers. We're going to have like 10-15 minutes if there is any question. Like always, this webinar will be recorded and then will be accessible by free in our YouTube platform. So, Pavel, thank you very much for your time, and the time is yours.
Okay, thank you. And Rodolfo, and also thanks to all the people that are joining the webinar. So dear ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues, I would like to explain you how do we at Hendrix Genetics look to the main principles of a good reading program for pullets, for layer pullets. I do not know why it does not work. What is a good quality pullet? At first we have to define what a good quality pullet means, and we can tell that there are 6 criteria to reach. The first is a body weight profile during the reading period. This means not only during the whole time of the reading period, but very important points are the body weight, or at least we consider the body weight at 5 weeks of age and then at transfer. Then a good reading pullet also must have a good feed intake capacity. The flock, when we speak about the whole flock, then we have to understand also that the flock must to have or should have a good uniformity, because then it is very important also for the further production of the flock, like all the other parameters. Then if we make a beak trimming, we have to speak about the quality of beak trimming, so it must be done well and in a proper way. We also have to understand that the flock should start the production according to the correct way, correct age, or it should reach the sexual maturity at a good age. It must be well prepared. And then, of course, the health status of the flock is also one of the important points or criteria to reach. And we have to understand, or we, at least at Hendrix Genetics, we understand the rearing phase of the flock as the investment phase for the production, because, and therefore it is very important. We have to understand that we try to prepare the birds in a certain time to reach the sexual maturity and to produce well and to make a good production during the whole, and especially in the recent years, even in extended production cycles. What to do, how to reach these goals? So at first we have to speak about the so-called brooding period, or the period of start of the chicks, when we speak about the chicks from 1 day and their life until 5 weeks of age. This is the period that we used to call brooding phase. And here we have the table that shows us the certain link or correlation between the parameters of the rearing phase, and this means the body weight of the chicks at 5 weeks of age, and then the body weight at 10 weeks of age, the body weight at 16 weeks of age, and the uniformity at 16 weeks of age. And on the other hand, we see here the production parameters. These are especially early maturity, production persistency, number of eggs produced till 60 or 72 weeks of age, and livability of the flock. And then we see here the correlation that is expressed with these crosses. More crosses, more correlation, or more or stronger correlation. And we see that the body weight at 5 weeks is really very strongly correlated to all the production parameters I have mentioned. And also, on the other hand, here we have uniformity. uniformity at 16 weeks of age. And we also see that the correlation between the uniformity at 16 weeks of age and then all the production parameters I have mentioned is also quite strong. And therefore, we insist a lot on the body weight, for example, in the brooding period, on the body weight at 5 weeks of age. We have to understand when we speak about the growth of the animals that all the tissues, they develop and they grow in a different pace. But in general, we can say, and we can see also that the growth go in a two such a, one would say in a two stronger paces, and that is that we obtain, the birds obtain the first peak of growth at roughly between 7 and 8 weeks of age, and then the other one is at before the sexual maturity at roughly 17, 18 weeks of age. And the the composition of the body of the bird develops according to this development of the different tissues, as I have already told. So at first, when the small chick is born, the first that grows very fast, these are internal organs. These mean heart, these mean liver, these mean lungs, and also the gastrointestinal tract that start to develop very fast. Then the next tissue that develops quite fast is also a skeleton or bone tissue that develops in a second wave quite fast as well. And then we see also here the development or quite fast, relatively fast development of muscles. And this all gives the development of the growth of the body weight. And then in the second peak that I have mentioned is more already a development of the reproductive tract. What we try to do, we try to force the birds or to enhance especially the development until 5 weeks of age. And therefore we speak a lot about the body weight at 5 weeks of age. That is very important, especially if we want to get the pullet before start of lay that has a very, let's say, lean composition and that does not have too much fat, because then we see also here the fat tissue starts to develop from more or faster from 8, 9 weeks of age, and then it develops further. And we do not want the pullet to have too much fat. We just want to have, as I have mentioned, a lean pullet that will start to produce. And then, of course, when we speak already about the flock, we have to be careful about the uniformity, because not all the birds develop in the same pace, but we try to steer the flock in the sense that all the birds, they develop relatively equally according to the body weight. And so any measurement that we take or any measure we take towards the flock will be represented by a same response from the individual birds. So as I have already told, the crucial is the 5 weeks body weight, the five weeks body weight of the chicks. How we can influence this, or what are the main principles how we can influence this 5-week body weight? The first parameter that we have to look for is the lighting program, because it influences the development of the chick quite intensively. Then there is a feed according to the quality of the feed, and especially in this brooding period we used to use the so-called starter feed. Then it is a stocking density of the flock, because very often the people, even if they have, or the farmers, even if they have for example, the so-called or the recommendations that we give, sometimes they tend to place more birds or to make a higher stocking density, and this is not the best way how to manage the flock. Then we also have to underline the environmental conditions, because these play also a very important role in the reaching the 5 weeks body weight of the bird. Then the water quality, the equipment, the amount of equipment that we give to the flock so that it can develop relatively fast. Then we already spoke about the beak trimming. If we do the beak trimming, we also have to care that the beak trimming is done by a professional people who do it well and proper as it should be done. We should not forget about the ventilation, and we all, at the end, we have to monitor all these parameters so that we can see already relatively soon if something is not developing as it should, and then we can repair if there is any mistake. And please do not forget, and that is what I will probably remind several times yet, that we have to care and we have to understand that any delay in a growth during the first weeks of age of the bird is very difficult to catch up if there is later on, if there is any delay. So therefore, we have to be very careful. What are the tools to increase the 5-week body weight related to the light? The first one is, of course, the lighting program. One of the things that we can use, and the farmers use more and more in the recent time, is the so-called intermittent lighting program. Then, for example, during the first week, you can make the lighting program like 4 hours of light, as you can see here, that are followed by 2 hours of night. And this one makes let's say a block that continues or changes 4 times per day. And that means together it makes 24 hours. Then the second week you can pass to the lighting program of 6 hours of light, followed by 2 hours of night. And also this whole block will then change 4 hours a day. And then from the second week, you can already start a slower step-down lighting program. And of course, you have to care about the light intensity, the uniformity of light intensity in the house. And this all will help you to reach the one of the targets I have mentioned, and that is the 5 weeks body weight. The other tool that can also or helps a lot to increase the body weight at 5 weeks, it is related to the feed. This is the feed formulation. So we recommend to use a strong and highly concentrated starter feed for the start of the birds. And it is highly concentrated in energy and in proteins. And also, if you do not have the special pullet feed, you can also use the broiler feed instead of a starter feed for pullets. We know, or in general, we can say, yes, this highly concentrated feed is more expensive compared to a feed that is not so concentrated. But on the other hand, we have to keep in mind that the birds, they do have the highest growth rate and the lowest FCR, so feed conversion ratio, in these first weeks, and therefore we have to take advantage of this. And therefore, in general, the costs would be relatively small because the amount of feed that is eaten by the birds during the first weeks of life is relatively small. One of the things that we should not forget is it is also important to have a good uniform structure of the feed. And therefore, we usually recommend and say that the best is if we can provide to the birds pellets or crumbles. This has a positive effect on the development of the birds. Then, according to the feed management, we also recommend to give, at least for the first 3 days, the feed also on paper, so that the birds, they meet really the pieces of the particles of feed everywhere where they move, and so they eat more, and of course they would also grow more. And after, let's say, 5 or 6 or 7 weeks of age, until the transfer, we can use, and we recommend strongly to use, a so-called empty feeder technique. I will explain this a bit later. And that is this empty feeder technique. That means that we tend and we let the birds to eat, to finish all the feed that is distributed per day, every day. So then finally they will reach the empty feeder, and we know that they have eaten all the feed that we have provided them. And this is a very good tool to steer the body weight of the chicks during the whole rearing period. So coming back to brooding conditions, we have to understand that the brooding conditions, they account also for a correct temperature in the house, the correct temperature of the litter or of the paper. As you can see here, we can have useful tools to check the litter temperature or the temperature of the paper. If we use paper for example, in cages, then it should have at least 30 degrees. And why it is so? Because if it is colder, the chicks, normally they stand on the feed, and then when they want to rest, they simply sit down, and they sit and they rest on the belly. And if the belly of the chick is chilled, then it could make a problem, because the digestion will not be good. The health status of the chick might be compromised later on, and that is not good. This is not something that will help the chick to have a good development. One of the things what we can do, that is to measure the body temperature of the chick, and this is what we usually do with the ear thermometer, as you see, and we measure the cloacal temperature of the chick. Here we have one of the things is that usually when you come to the house, you look in general how the chicks are placed, where they are, if they are not crowded, if they are not too much split, or if they are in the surrounding close to the walls where it is probably a bit colder, and you have to check all this. But if you want to be more precise, one of the best things to do is to measure the cloacal temperature of the chicks. And we ask and we recommend to try to find, in measuring, let's say, 20, 30 chicks in the house, and we look for 40 degrees of centigrade or 104 degrees of Fahrenheit. One of the things is that normally if you bring the chicks into the house, you bring them in the boxes, you should not leave them in the boxes for a long time, because then when you check the body temperature, you could see that the temperature is higher than you want. And the main point is to try to keep as close as to this 40 degrees or 100 centigrade or 104 degrees Fahrenheit of the cloacal temperature of the chicks. So in general, when we speak about the whole environment, we speak about 35 degrees in the environment. We speak about 40 degrees of the chicks, speaking in centigrade, and 30 degrees at least of the bottom, so of the floor. And this all is very necessary, especially in the first weeks, and even more in the first days of the life of the chick, because in the first days, the chick is not very capable to control its own temperature, its own body temperature, and therefore it relies on the temperature that we offer him. And therefore you can see it also when you make a comparison, when you see that the chicks are not in a good mood, or you see that the body temperature is not 40 degrees, you just increase the house temperature, let's say in 1 or 2 degrees, and you will see that the chicks react relatively fast, and in a few minutes, in 15, 20 minutes, you will see that the body temperature is also increasing. So it is very important. Then we should not forget about water. Water is one of the main nutrients for the chicks, and we should provide the water in a sufficient quantity and in a sufficient, let's say, quality also during the whole life of the chicks. Because if the chicks do not drink, they would not eat. If they do not eat, they would not grow and they would not produce. That is normal. That is something that is relatively easy to understand, and therefore we have to care about the water as well during the whole life of the chicks. And here you can see the water should be easily accessible. So we speak here about for example, the amount of watering places, amount of the nipples or troughs that we have. The water must be clean. Please be aware that usually when I come to the house and I speak with the farmers and I see that the water is not clean, I usually recommend to the farmers that they should drink the same water as the chicks do. So if they would not drink the water that is not clean, they should not try to offer that to the chicks. It must be fresh. Here you have to care as well, because sometimes it might happen that you heat the house before the chicks are coming, and then if you do not flush the drinking system, it might be that the water is simply hot. And if it is very, very warm, or if it is hot, the chicks would not drink it, or not in a sufficient quantity. On the other hand, you have to be careful, because sometimes what I have also seen in the farms, that simply the water was, let's say, 6 degrees, and it is too cold for the chicks. It means that the chicks would drink less of that water, and at the same time, if they drink more, they could have a digestion problem. So that is also one of the things. It must be tasteless, or it should be tasteless. So normally during the period when you clean the house and you disinfect, also you disinfect the watering system or the drinking system, and then you have to flush it, because if there is a rest of disinfectants, or if there are rests of detergents, it alters the taste, and the chicks would not drink it as in a quantity that is necessary. And then, of course, it should be free of contaminants. So be careful also about that, because sometimes, especially with rearing, for example, in alternative conditions that are not in the house, then the chicks have an access to outside, to a winter garden, or even to range. Then be careful, because if there are pits where after the rain you can have water, so the chicks would tend to drink that water, and that is not good. of course, because they might have a problem. So, and then when I spoke about the accessibility, please have a look here. You see a wrong example. The nipple is too low and the chick has to bend to get to the nipple, and it is not good because then it will not drink as much as it should. And this one as well. Be careful about that. On the other hand, here you see a good example where the chicks, they can reach the nipple very easily, and they can drink much more than in the other example. And here you can see even a worse example where the chicks has to stretch a lot. On even if I have this video, and if I could show it to you, you would see that it has even to jump to get the nipple to the nipple. So it means it will not drink as much as it should, and of course it will not grow as it should. On the other hand, also we have to understand what I told already, that you have to adjust the drinker height during the whole rearing period, and not only rearing but also production. Because if it is very low, the chicks would not drink as much as they should, and then of course the growth or the production will not be as you await. Like in here you have a good example. So they have to reach the nipples or the drinking system very easily and without any bigger troubles. When we speak also about the starting of the chicks, one of the things that we have to monitor is how the chick, after placement of the chicks in the house, how fast do they eat and how fast do they drink. You can check the crop of the chick. You see here that it is like a small ball. And of course, one of the things is just it must be full. That is one thing. And the other thing is that you can only palpate. You have to touch. If it is not only full, but if it is also smooth, it must not be hard. It must be smooth, because if they just eat and they do not drink, it will be hard. But you want to have them both. It means water and feed. And then usually we say that 80% of chicks should have eaten 10 hours after the placement, and 95% of the chicks should have eaten and drunk after 24 hours after placement. So that is the things to monitor and to check during this brooding period. Then we have a period from 5 to 17 weeks of age when we try to make and to develop a productive hen. And this is also quite important period of the life of the pullet. And we have, of course, to monitor the flock and the chicks. If they develop well, we have to make a body weight check, and this should be done on a weekly basis. And of course, if you do not measure the body weight, you simply do not know how the chicks develop, and then of course it is much more difficult to manage the flock. Do not forget about the feed intake. The feed intake depends on the nutritional level of the feed. It depends on the feed structure. It depends on the local circumstances. It means the temperature. It means depends on the climate. It depends on the water consumption, on the quality of water, on the health status of the chicks. And of course, if you look to the management guides, you would find that there is a table that says the estimate how much the chick or the pullet should eat during day or per day. But one of the principal points is this is not a standard. The only standard you have is the body weight, and you should not aim too much on the table that you find in the management guide, that this is just the feed amount that the chick should eat, but you should check also the feed intake. It means the amount of the feed that the chick has eaten, also the amount of water that it has drank. But the main principle is, or the main point to check is the body weight. And therefore, you have to care about the body weight of the chicks. And that is the main driver for the rearing period of the chicks. Do not forget what I have already told, that during the rearing period, we use several types of feed. So we start with the starter, then we pass to the grower, we pass to the developer. And in any case, you should of course, you should change between these feeds, but this change should be always done on the base of the body weight and not on the age, because also again in the management guide you will find that let's say that the first feed or the starter feed should be provided till 5 weeks of age, and then the grower till 10 weeks of age. But always, if you make a change, you make it on the base of the body weight. And do not forget that if the feed is presented it could be presented as a mash or a crumble. If it is in crumbled form and if it has a higher energy content, then there is a higher possibility that the body weight will grow faster. So do not forget this. And if you can, every time it is good to have to provide, especially for the first period of life of the chicks, the feed in the crumbled or pelleted form. As I have already mentioned, we use several feeds during the rearing of the chicks. And as I told, it is a starter feed and a grower feed, a developer feed, and a pre-layer feed. Normally, for example, the concentration goes down or decreases slightly from starter to grower to developer, but then from pre-lay feed, it should be more concentrated. And also the layer feed should be more concentrated than pre-lay. Maybe not too much, but even so, you should do all to make it in this sense. So you decrease at first for the first, let's say 16 weeks of life, you slightly decrease the concentration of the feed, and then you should increase them. I have already mentioned the so-called empty feeder technique. We used to say in the company that the good farmer, the good zootechnician, he starts to feed the birds 2 or 3 hours before lights off. So this is the rearing period. You see that the lighting period, it could be 10 or 12 hours of light, and then there is a night period that is represented by this black stripe. And if you feed the birds here 2 to 3 hours before lights off, then you give a certain amount of feed to the feeders and the birds start to eat. At first, of course, they would eat as normally the bigger particles, and then they would not eat too much or too fast the fine particles and the powder that is also in the feed. Then they will have a night period when they become hungry, and then from the morning, because they are already slightly hungry, they would easier finish also the fine particles of the feed. And this is what we want. And then they could reach the empty feeder, so they would eat all the feed that was presented to them this day. And that is very important because we use a so-called complete feed for the birds. And we want them to eat it all. And to eat also the fines, because very often in fines, they would find microelements, they would find minerals, they would find synthetic amino acids, they would find salt and vitamins and minerals, as I have told. So they need really, and of course, salt. And therefore, they really need to eat it all. And the best way is to reach the empty feeder, let's say for 1 or maybe 2 hours per day during rearing period. And we then recommend a very similar system in the production period as well. And one of the advantages is also of this system is that the birds, they train, or you train themselves to eat faster. If they eat faster, they would develop better the crop and the digestive tract. And that is what helps them to increase the feed intake at start of lay, and that is very important as well. Then we spoke about the uniformity. The system of feeding I have mentioned also enhances the uniformity of the flock because they all eat faster, and then they can reach, or the majority of the birds, they should reach the very similar body weight. When we speak about the uniformity means that you take a sample of the birds, you weigh them all, and then you express in percentage how many of them from this sample falls into the range from minus to plus 10% above the average. If this uniformity is above 90%, it is good. If it is 85 to 90%, it is still acceptable. And if it is lower than 85%, it is not very good. So or it is poor. So you have to check the uniformity. You do not only check the body weight, you also check the uniformity. And then if you see that the uniformity is not developing as you should, as it should, you should try to look for the reasons and then to find a remedy. One of the possibilities how to measure the body weight, of course, you do not need to make the graph as I have mentioned or I have shown in the previous slide, but you simply put the body weight and then the measured weight of the individual chicks here, and then finally here you will see a certain sort of the graph, and you can estimate what is the uniformity of the flock already on the first side. So that is one of the things that you can use. And of course, then if you see that the birds do not have the uniformity as it should be, you should look for the for the reason. So it could be the dehydrated or fixed or weak or infected chicks at the arrival. It could be poor breeding conditions. So if insufficient heat or ventilation or crowding, not good litter or ammonia in the house, or the system that doesn't, the feeding or drinking system that does not work. So the stuck nipples or something like that, or the, let's say, the feeding system that does not distribute the feed as it should. Then, of course, the incorrect beak trimming, for example, or too high stocking densities, that is what I have already mentioned. And because then there is an excessive competition for feed and water and excessive competition for the space. And these all are parameters that influence a lot the good development of the chick. Do not forget the litter and ventilation problems. So if the litter starts to be caked, or it is wet or something, that does not help too much the birds. Then be careful about the uneven conditions in the house. So the temperature, the lighting, or light intensity. Then do not forget about the feeding management. It also should be done properly. So one of the problems could be if you use too many feed distributions per day, because then the chicks, they will try to pick up the bigger particles all the time when you every time when you distribute the feed, and they will leave the rest. And that is not what you need. And then, of course, there will be an accumulation of these fine particles at the end of the day or at the end of the week. So therefore, we speak about this empty feeder technique. And then, of course, the feed presentation is also very important. If the feed is very fine, that is not good, because the chicks need much more time to eat it, so they will eat much slower. They will not eat enough, probably. If there are many big particles, it will lead to a selective behavior, to selective feeding behavior. So they will pick up the big particles, and that's it. They would not eat the fine. So therefore, also the feed presentation should be uniform. And of course, do not forget about these challenges and stress levels that also are provided by different vaccinations and all the measurements or all the measures that you take towards the flock. One of the things how you can also try to monitor the flock and the development of the flock, development of the birds, is to check the uniformity by looking at the feather change or molting of the feathers. And the best way is to check the primaries. These are primaries, what I see now, what you see now, what I show you. These are so-called primaries. And you see here between primaries and secondaries, there is a so-called axial feather. And the molt always starts with the first feather closest to the axial feather towards the end of or the tip of the wing. And then they molt 1 week, 1 feather per week for the first 6 feathers, and then they are a bit faster, so they are a bit slower, and then all the feathers that are molted or that are changed, you see that they have rounded ends, and the old feathers that should be still changed, they are spiky. And so according to the numbers of spiking feathers, or these feathers that are sharp at the end, according to the numbers, we speak about the feather score of the birds. And while strolling around the house, you should always try to catch several birds, and you look to the feather score. And if the feather score is equal, it means that the flock is mostly quite uniform. Then also here you can find, and later on you can have a look. It is the same picture as I have shown, but it is just a scheme, and it tells the same story as I told you just a minute ago with the previous slide. Do not forget about the transfer. Transfer is the moment when you take the birds from rearing house or rearing farm to the production farms. Transfer is one of the big stresses for the birds that you provide them. So it should be done very fast. It should be done smoothly. So please do not engage the groups that are sometimes the groups of, I would say in brackets, cowboys that come and they are very rough in taking the birds and in transferring the birds. So it must be done smoothly, because as I told, it is already itself, it's quite a big stress. So it must be done smoothly and as fast as possible. Do not forget that the birds after transfer and from start of lay, they should increase their body weight from, let's say, 70 weeks to the peak of lay for about 30%, but they must also increase the feed intake. And these are all parameters that you have to look for after transfer. And do not forget that the birds, they still need to grow. And you have to check if they grow enough. And if they do not, you should also look for remedies. You should look for the reasons and then for the remedies, how to do. So, because if the birds have a low body weight at start of lay, it will lead to a poor peak of lay. It will lead to small eggs from start of lay, to a poor persistency of lay towards the end of lay, and increased mortality. And of course, poor eggshell quality towards the end of the laying period. So therefore, the transfer is a very important phase. And do not forget that the birds, the rearing is not finished at 17 weeks when you transfer the birds. The rearing is finished when the birds stop to grow, and so it means it's around 35 weeks of age. So therefore, you have to care about the body weight of the birds, and based on the, let's say, regular and weekly check of the body weight during the start of lay. So that is roughly all what I wanted to tell you today, the information I wanted to share with you. And please do not forget, here you can find all the management guides that we provide, and you can find them on our on Hendrix Genetics website. And I thank you a lot for your attention. And then, of course, if you have questions, I think that we still do have some time to answer, of course, if I will know. So that is roughly all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A very nice presentation, Pavel. So we have two questions. I don't know if you can see it. If not, I can read it for you.
I will take from the presenting
Simon, Simon is Roca. What water temperature is the first in the first few days you recommend? How often recommend to flash? I think it's flush. I don't know, flash in the first week.
Sorry. So you ask about the temperature. What we recommend
Yes.
as a temperature? So the house temperature. Sorry.
The water temperature.
Water temperature. So in the first days, we would recommend to have the water temperature close to 25. It could be 25, 30 degrees, but just be careful that it is not, as I have mentioned. I have seen the temperature of 8. That was one extreme, 8 degrees centigrade. And then the other extreme was, I did not measure that, but when I tried with the nipple, the water was hot. So these are two extremes. So the best would be for the first few days, let's say 25 degrees. And then, of course, you can normally use the water of like potable water of 20 degrees of centigrade. But be careful not to have one or the other extreme. Okay?
Okay. So then the second questions, do you recommend in first day supplementary cup?
Yes. What we recommend if we have the drinking system, like if we have nipples, so you can have these droplet cups as you have seen, or you can have, and what we recommend as well, and especially if the birds are beak treated in the hatchery. So if they have a infrared beak treatment, for example, or even if the with the blade, it is always good to have a supplementary drinker. So to put just some bell drinkers into the house. And of course, if you have the house when the birds are in the barn, then you can then gradually pick them back or take them back, withdraw them back. If you have cages, you have to be careful, and you have to, the best is to put two bell drinkers, small bell drinkers to the per cage, and then you take out one and then the other one, so that there is not a big shock for the birds that are accustomed to drink from these additional drinkers. But always the additional drinkers, I recommend always to use the additional drinkers. I know that it is a bit more of the work for the, because you need people to do that, and you need also to clean them and so on, but it always is beneficial for the birds.
Okay, perfect. Then we have another question. Say number one, can we get, I think it's scientific breakdown on how lighting programs affect 5-week body weight of a flock?
How does it? Yes, it influences. So at first, the lighting program I've shown, this intermittent lighting, it makes the birds or the flock it makes a certain rhythm to the flock. So they have a activity, or they are more active during the 4 hours of light during the first weeks, or 6 hours of light, and then they have a 2 hours of night. That means it's a certain sort of a rest for them, but it reactivates the chicks, let's say 4 times per day, and it makes it, or 3 times a day, the next one, because the chicks usually, they tend to eat more before lights off and also at lights on. And then what we recommend as well is the longer or slower step down lighting program. So after the second week of this intermittent program, you can continue with 18 hours of light, and you decrease slowly. And if you decrease slower, it means you do not need to reach, let's say, the 6 hours, or sometimes it was a long time ago, but let's say today we speak about 9 or 10 hours of light at 6 weeks of age. You can reach this 8 or 10 hours of light even at 10 weeks of age. So it means if you give them a bit more time, they would eat more. So that's it. And of course, it depends also when you have, for example, the history of the flock, of the house before. So you have seen that with the flocks, with the previous flocks, you had a trouble to get the 5 weeks body weight. So you should try to make a slower step down program, so they would reach at 5 weeks. They still will have a longer day. So that is the point.
Okay, thank you. I think we have the last questions. The last question is what to do if body weight is a per standard, but uniformity is less during 18 weeks.
So at first point is, normally I recommend to try to keep the body weight as close to the standard as possible. So I would say if the flock is 1 week in advance, so it means, let's say, 5% more above the standard, that is not a scandal. But if you let them grow too much, it is not good. And then, of course, the uniformity, usually when the body weight is higher, usually the uniformity is better. But you should not let yourself to sleep, like we used to say, on roses. So it is not good. If you should try to keep the body weight closer to the standard, and then if you see that the body weight is too high and that is not, the uniformity is not good, you should look for possible reasons. And I have mentioned the possible reasons. And if you have more questions or more precise questions to that, please precise what exactly, or what was the uniformity, and how were the chicks that were not if there are too many smalls, or if they are stunting chicks, or the chicks that are really much underdeveloped or something like that. So you should try to find the reason, and then when you find the reason, you could try easier to find the remedy. But be careful about the overcrowding of the flocks, because this is one of the reasons. And then not enough feeder space, not enough drinker space. That is something that you could find very often when you go to the farms.
Okay, then there is another question. Are we getting the slides of the presentation? Usually we don't share the PPTs, but the video is gonna be completely free and you can see it as many as you want, and it's gonna be accessible in 1 week. So there is another question. How should we address a situation where uniformity is above 85%, yet body weight is below the standard? I think that you already say that, right?
Well, if the body weight is below standard, you should care. You should be careful, because sometimes it is possible. Sometimes the people do it on purpose, because, for example, it depends on the egg weight you want to reach. Because normally the egg weight of the bird, you have a standard egg weight that normally the bird attains when it has a standard body weight. If the body weight is lower, then the egg weight could be lower as well. So the principle is, if you want to have a standard body weight, just do not start the light stimulation before the chicks reach the standard body weight for that is good for the light stimulation. So we say, let's say 1,350 or 1,400 grams for the brown chicks. But always be careful, because the egg weight during production is very dependent on the body weight of the pullet at light stimulation and at start of lay. So if you have the chicks that are below standard body weight, I would delay the light stimulation, but try to reach the correct body weight. So also, if the flock is below the standard body weight, you should look for possible reasons. So be careful about the lighting program, about empty feeder technique, and all the things that I have mentioned.
Okay, perfect. We have another one, I think is in the same direction. If uniformity is 75% at 15 week, what are the measures to recover it?
Well, at 15 weeks, it's already a bit late. So therefore, you have to check the uniformities as soon as you start to check the body weight. So I would start from the, let's say, maybe not first, second, third week or 5 weeks of age. You should already try and normally that is what we recommend. You should check the body weight from very early, from, let's say, already from brooding period. And then you check the uniformity during the whole life. And at 15 weeks, it is already a bit late, but still, what can be done? So try to look for what is the reason. So if you have enough space, if the birds, not you, but the birds, if they have enough space, if there is enough drinking and feeding equipment, and you try, because if the uniformity is not good, it means that you have small birds there. If you have small birds that are less developed, so you can, if you have enough time and enough manpower, you can try to select the smaller birds and put them in a certain pen, for example. But the best way would be to delay if you speak and you still work with the whole flock and you cannot do it differently. So try to postpone the light stimulation of the birds, because the birds, in those that are heavier, they will start to lay if you want or not, if you make the light stimulation or not. But the small ones, when you start to stimulate the flock, they will start to lay, and then they will probably not reach the peak, or when they reach the peak, they will drop the production. So that is one of the things that can happen. So therefore, be careful about that. I do not know if you can really, because from 15 weeks to 17, as we say that you should, or the flock should be transferred at least during the week 17. So I think that you do not have so much time, but at first, for the future flocks, try to find or to count, because very often the people simply do not count. Look to the standards, what we say, how much feeders, how much drinkers you should have for the birds, and then what should be the quantity of the birds per square meter. So if they are not too much crowded or something like that, and start from this. And of course, if you have more questions like that, do not hesitate. You can still send a mail and write a mail, and we can discuss more about that if you wish, of course.
Okay, we have a couple of minutes, 5 minutes for more questions. What is the best age for transfer to production?
That is what I have told just a minute ago. So normally, if everything goes according to standard and the birds, they start to lay from somewhere 18 weeks of age. So the latest point is 17 weeks of age. So at least 1 week or 2 weeks, better 1 week, 10 days before the first egg appears. Because if you delay the transfer, and if the birds start to lay already in a rearing farm, that is not good, because they start to lay, they do not have the proper feed, because normally they should be with the developer, or probably sometimes you could also give the pre-lay feed, but that is not good for start of lay. So that is the first point. And the second point is, if they start to lay already in rearing house or in rearing farm, the manipulation during transfer could be, even if it is soft, it could make that some of the yolk follicles will fall out of the will not fall into the infundibulum and in the oviduct, and therefore it will fall to the body cavity, and it can make a problem, and then you will find more cases, or you could find more cases of inflamed yolks in the body cavity, and that is not what you want. So at least try to transfer at least 1 week, 10 days before the first egg appears. And that is, of course, you have to follow, you have to check the you should look to the combs, you should look to the wattles, how the birds are developed, you should look to how the pubic bones are in which state, so how they are, if they are spread already, or if they start to spread. So these are all signs that will show you that the birds will start to lay. So you have to care about this, and of course you have to inspect the birds, the flock.
Okay, perfect. Another question, in case of underdevelopment birds, is supplying the bird with amino acid supplements is a good option?
Yes, it is one of the options, but at first try to find how much they are undeveloped and from which age, because if you see they are underdeveloped at 4 weeks, so you try to make better the brooding conditions next time, and then if it is later, it might be because sometimes the farmers, they used to put more birds into a smaller space for start because of saving energy and everything, so they put them to less tiers if the house is if you have the birds in caged houses, or if it is on the floor in the barn, sometimes they put all the birds only just 1/2 of the house or 1/3 of the house because of the heating, so they do not spend too much for heating. But be careful, because then of course you have just 1/3 of the total equipment there, or 1/2. So be careful about this could be the reasons also. So you have to find, you have to think about, and then you have to try to find the reason.
Okay. One more question. Is there any significance of taking uniformity of chicks during day-old stage when it arrives to the farm?
Well, the uniformity of the old chicks, of course, that is what I always recommend, to check the uniformity of the day-old chicks. But well, it is maybe it is well, we do not have a standard for that, but I try to look for the uniformity. And usually when the birds are okay, I would say I find more than 85% or 80% of uniformity. That is one thing that you can do. But then in any case, even if the chicks are, for example, smaller or something like that, you have to make them good conditions, good brooding conditions. So do not forget about the amount of drinkers, amount of nipples, the height of nipples, and then enough heat, for example. And of course you have to look for, because sometimes in the houses you could have hot spots, like if you have the gas cannon in the house and it is blowing towards a certain spot, it would be more heated there, and then also it is not very comfortable for the chicks. If it is the house with cages, also it could blow towards the cage, and then you will check the cloacal temperature of the chick, and instead of finding 104, you would find 107 degrees of Fahrenheit, and that is already a problem. So you should try to look for the best possible conditions of the birds, and then of course normally the uniformity, you will see that the uniformity stays on a certain level, and if it does not, so try to look for the reasons.
Okay, we have the last question. It's what is the right age to start empty feeder program?
Well, normally, if the body weight is correct, I would start from 6 weeks of age, for example, or 5 weeks of age. If you see that at 5 weeks of age the birds have a correct body weight, you can start to train them, and you will start with feeding. Well, if before you fed, let's say 3 or 4 times a day, and then you start to withdraw one feeding, one distribution of the feed, and I would do in the same in the way that I would try to extend the time between the two feedings, or between the first feeding and let's say the third feeding. If you switch on the light at for example at 6, and then you switch off at let's say 12 or 8 or yes, let's say 12 hours later. So you try to extend the time difference between the feed distributions and make the system in such a way that they would reach the empty feeder roughly by noon or before noon, and try to insist a lot, or underline the feeding, the distribution in the afternoon, so before lights off.
Another question, what about grading the birds, and when's the best time to do it?
Normally you weigh the birds
Grading,
first,
grading, grading.
grading, it means that you want to select the bad ones.
Okay.
Well, if you
What
see
about
normally if you go, you stroll through the flock, or you are in the house with the cages, and you have to observe, and when you see the weak birds, you would tend to take them out. So you should do it gradually. And then, of course, when you produce the pullets for somebody else and also for your farm, you have today to make a final grading at transfer, so that you take out the small ones, or the birds that are stunting or something. You take them out during the whole time, but then at least at the moment of transfer, when you have them all in hands, you make the vaccination. So of course, instantly, when you or the veterinarian or somebody who makes for example, who makes the vaccination, the inactivated vaccination, for example, you have them in the hands, and then you just select those that are not good.
Okay,
And
so we
hopefully,
have
of course,
the
sorry,
last question.
yes.
In cage system, birds cannot eat together in the same cages. The first ones eat the larger part. Percentage powder feed remains. How it can affect the growth?
It can affect the growth, but one of the things that you can do, for example, if you at first you should have the feed distribution system that is relatively fast, that distributes the feed, let's say in a few minutes throughout the house. And then the second point, what you can do, you can switch off the light for the feed distribution. So you switch off the light for these, let's say 15-20 minutes, you distribute the feed, and then you switch on the light. That can help a bit. And of course, you should care about the quality of the feed in the sense of the structure. I know that it is quite a big problem, and very often the good structure is not easy to get, or to buy the feed of a good structure, but it is possible. And then when you have the feed that is not well structured, you can do like as I told, because always the birds, they simply tend to eat at first the bigger particles, because they are granivores. So that is normal. And one of the things that you can do is to, of course, you have to, or the birds have to have enough feeding space. If they do not have enough feeding space, and you just rely on more feed distribution, that is not good, because still it's like in the society, those who are more strong and who are more aggressive, they will eat first. And that is not good for the chicks, because you want to have a uniformity.
Okay, so we're done. Thank you very much. And we appreciate all your time and your effort, Pavel. And we're very excited about these presentations, and then the open space for doing questions. I think is a good dynamics for learning and trying to interact with the audience. You can find Pavel in social media and through his email. And we're excited about this collaboration again. And as we shared before, this recording is going to be open, accessible in 1 week and a half. So, guys, thank you very much, and Pavel, thank you very much, and for joining us. And thank you to Hendrix Genetic for supporting this space. Thank you, Pavel.
Okay, I also would like to thank you, Rodolfo, and also to all the guys who were present. And I would like just to say one more sentence. Please do not hesitate, if you have questions. Do not hesitate to reach to the Hendrix Genetics site, and you will find the information about the possible contacts. And you just simply send a question, and then of course we do have people who are there, and who can discuss with you about the more specific trouble. Many thanks again, and goodbye. See you one day somewhere. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you,
Thank you,
Rodolfo.
everybody.
Bye
Thank you,
bye.
Pavel. Bye bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.